Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Welcome in, everybody. A big-time Reaction Monday, one of the bigger Reaction Mondays of the year here on Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor alongside you. Jad Chambers producing. We have a Chiefs loss to get to. We've got KU and K-State bowl games to get to. Big Wichita State basketball to get to. The Chiefs lose on Sunday Night Football, but they lost a whole lot more than the game. All kinds of things for you to digest today, and you can chime in on that IHOP hotline at 869-1240. We will get you on that IHOP hotline some giveaways, a meal from Riverside Cafe in Derby, some movie tickets, some HTOs, so make sure you've got that handy. Shreyas Laddha, our KU insider, will join us top of the next hour and dig into KU's bowl selection. We'll have all kinds of stuff on that throughout the next month, really. Tommy, I was out of town, over the weekend, got back yesterday, and it's like just trying to play constant catch-up, like trying to, drink water out of a fire hose here with everything that's gone on in the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I mean, we typically have big Reaction Mondays anyway, but I'm not sure as big of a Reaction Monday in a while. Like, there's so much happening right now, and we didn't even mention the CFP decision from over the weekend. That's massive as well that I know we'll get into. So there's a lot to talk about today.
That CFP stuff, boy. I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. We'll get into the CFP decisions yesterday, the ludicrous, asinine, ridiculous, stupid, makes no sense decisions that were made with the CFP. Thank God it's leaving. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Let's start with the Chiefs. They lose on Sunday Night Football. Tommy, I have not been concerned with the Chiefs based on outcomes very much this year. I do have concern after this one because of the injury list coming out of it. It's part of the reason I haven't been concerned for the Chiefs this year is they've stayed relatively healthy compared to the rest of the league. It's been a bloodbath, as it usually is in the NFL, and the Chiefs have avoided most of those. They did not yesterday. They lost at times. It felt like, 6 starters at different times in that game. A couple of those injuries are moderately serious here to very serious, as Brian Cook had a very gnarly injury that he left with. You had a concussion for Drew Tranquil, so who knows what happens there. You had your starting left tackle leave in the game. Isaiah Pacheco, Justin Reed, Charles Omenihu all left at different times. It got a little dicey there. And, injuries are always a concern in the NFL. And so now after that loss, as we know about the injuries going into the game as well, I think there is some concern for me now for this team as it's coming down the home stretch here without a lot of its key players.
Well, I mean, it's the injuries, but then it's just also the way that the game played out too. I mean, I think that you can talk all day long about how different players went down. You can talk all day long about the referees and the way that, some of those calls were made down the stretch. But at the end of the day, the Packers beat the Chiefs, right?
Oh,
the Packers
totally.
The Packers were the better team last night. Jordan Love played out of his mind. And, they were up and ready to go. The Packers were in prime time in Lambeau in the month of December. Matt LaFleur, as the head coach of the Packers, is undefeated in the month of December. He's 16-0 as the head coach of the Green Bay Packers in the month of December. So the guy knows what he's doing in this month, and he showed it against Kansas City last night.
He's a young team that's obviously, getting better, which shame on us for not thinking they were. I had the Chiefs finishing off some parlays and things last night, and I'm starting to see the push alerts come in from the betting sites. 85% of the money is coming in on the Chiefs. Are you going to join in on the action?
It felt kind of trappy.
We're screwed.
It felt kind of trappy.
Like there's no way. Like they're not covering that number, let alone not winning the game. You mentioned the Chiefs lost the game. I agree. The Chiefs agree. Let's get some audio from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes after the game.
They're good. I mean, they're a good football team, and they did some good things offensively, and then we kind of shot ourselves in the foot offensively with the penalties in the red zone. You got to capitalize on those, and this one. I'll take this one. We got to do better, and that's my responsibility. Make sure we do better. Start faster.
We made too many mistakes. But they played they had a good game plan, played a good game. Jordan played great. But at the end of the day, you make too many mistakes, and against a good football team, you lose.
So the Packers are really interesting. They are obviously better than they were a month ago, but they're getting better. It's kind of all on Jordan Love. I've kind of been a Jordan Love guy. I'm not with the masses so much yesterday. I think there was a lot of luck involved with his good game. Some of those just throw him up balls. Those weren't good passes. That
they weren't defended well at all by Kansas City.
That's what I'm saying. But so let's just I heard a lot, and I get it, and I would have done the same thing. I heard a lot of, oh man, it looks like Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre out there. No, it doesn't. It looked more like Brett Favre than it did like Aaron Rodgers. Just throw one up and see what happens. But again, I like Jordan Love. I root for Jordan Love. They weren't, he wasn't as good as he was being portrayed. Some of those throws, again, I thought were kind of lucky. They happened, and he's got talented young receivers to go make plays on the ball. Big difference between he and Patrick Mahomes right now. So the Chiefs, the long term for the Chiefs, obviously the injuries are the biggest long-term concern. The fact that Mahomes was pressured more than it felt like he has been all year was a bit concerning to me, and most of those came in the red zone. The Chiefs score in the red zone. We're talking about a totally different outcome, but they kept getting sacked. They kept getting penalties in the red zone. So that allowed Green Bay to sort of do what it wanted to do. That would be a little concerning to me, is that, that solid offensive line has, and I thought, to me too, that was the worst defensive game that the Chiefs have played. Now, again, they were dropping like flies, so I don't know how much of it is that, but just in general, certainly the worst game their secondaries played. There were way too many balls they should have hawked or whatever it needed to be done. I thought that was their worst game. They didn't have enough pressure. They did have a lot of injuries. So we'll see. Both of those things have a chance to bounce back here. The Chiefs' schedule, as we've mentioned, is pretty soft down the stretch. Both of those things have time to get corrected, but those would be areas of pretty serious concern, I think, when it doesn't appear that, there is, elite team this year, that if everybody's that close, those are things you can't do, right? You can't give up sacks in the red zone. And the Chiefs need their defense, Tommy, to be one of the best in the league if they're going to win a Super Bowl. That's sort of been what's being cooked in, right, to the struggles of the offense, is that the defense would be outstanding. And it was not outstanding last night.
Isaiah Pacheco had a great game running the football, 110 yards on the ground, had a touchdown. And I understand that Kansas City was down in the fourth quarter, but they completely abandoned Isaiah Pacheco. He had one carry in the fourth quarter. And at that point, I thought that early on, they did a fairly good job, I think, balancing the run and the pass. And then I don't know if the game plan got away from them, if it was kind of desperation mode. They've got to get back in the game, so they're going to throw the ball more. But Isaiah Pacheco was so dominant on the ground. He was keeping the Green Bay defense honest. As soon as they moved away from that, well, then the Green Bay defense knew, okay, well, they're not going to give the ball to Pacheco. They're just going to throw the ball down the field and see what happens. And that didn't work out for them. I think you mentioned the red zone issues with Kansas City and the pressure that Green Bay got on Patrick Mahomes. I think part of the issue offensively for me is that, and what is different this year from in years past, is that they have no margin of error, right? Things have to go exactly correct all the time for Kansas City's offense for them to have a level of success. That margin of error that's been baked in for a number of years, where we've been talking about a dynasty and multiple times Super Bowl champions, that doesn't exist this season. They have to string together a near perfect game, 4 quarters, for them to be able to play at a level of a Green Bay last night. And they didn't do that. So I think that's, we could talk about how concerned are you with the Chiefs moving forward? Are they a championship winning team? All of that. They've got a ton of talent. That hasn't changed. But the margin of error that we're so used to them having, they don't have anymore.
Right. I totally agree. And the defense had given them that margin. And look, Kansas City is right there with San Francisco, Baltimore, if you want to put them there. I think it's still totally fine to put Philadelphia there, and Dallas. That's probably
do we really think they are?
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm not sure that I believe that. After watching what the Niners did to the Eagles yesterday.
So are you taking the
Ni-
Eagles out of the conversation then?
No. I'm not taking the Eagles out of the conversation. I'm saying that the 49ers, if you want to talk about an elite team, I mean, the way the 49ers played yesterday on the road in Philly, taking down, I mean, like I was completely wrong with the way that game played out. I thought the Eagles would win the game. I thought the Eagles would cover. Man, the Niners just killed them.
I love the
I'm
Niners.
not sure.
The Niners had 10 days to prepare for that game.
I'm not sure I'm putting Kansas City through 12 games up at the same level where San Francisco and maybe even Philadelphia are right now.
San Francisco lost to Cleveland, Minnesota, and Cincinnati in back-to-back weeks.
Without Deebo Samuel, without Trent Williams. Like they didn't have those guys.
But you're making excuses. The Chiefs lost like 6 starters yesterday. So, and they had Brock Purdy in the loss against Cleveland. I believe they had him in the loss against Minnesota.
Well, they
had him in both of those games. They had Brock Purdy in both of those games. Well, everybody's got injuries. That's what I'm saying. The margin of error is thin for every team in the NFL this year. Brock Purdy, by the way, played in all 3 of those losses. So I don't know. I'm just saying, like, there is not, and most years it's been the Chiefs, right? Like there is an elite team, and maybe Buffalo was in there too, or Cincinnati, and that's what we thought it would be this year, and neither of those teams are it. I don't think there is a team that is head and shoulders above the rest. I think San Francisco looks the best right now in week whatever we're in, right? But there have been times this year where they did not look like that either. They've done it the most consistently, but they did have their stretch of 3 games that made no sense. Everybody's got injuries to deal with, so can the Chiefs are they right there in the mix with any of those teams? I think they are. I just, as I watch this league every week, I think that list of those teams is getting a little bit bigger every week, right? Like I think that you've got 3 teams in the NFC right now, and I think you've got at least 2 in the AFC. Probably we'll see what Jacksonville does tonight against hobbled Cincinnati. I mean, I guess you got to put Jacksonville in that mix. They just continue to win games. And we'll see, what Buffalo is able to piece together down the stretch here. But there are a lot of teams, and that's going to be fun to see because Kansas City has had they've just felt that much better than everybody they've played for 4 years now. And it's not the case this year. And they are very capable, clearly, of making mistakes. And Mahomes, who never makes mistakes, is very capable of making mistakes. I don't know whose fault it was on that interception. To me, it looked like a Mahomes mistake. I know a lot of people are trying to blame Sky Moore. The throw came so early in the play. I don't know what else Sky Moore was going to be able to do to prevent that.
I think it was both. I think it was both of them to an extent. I mean, if you watch the replays on that, Moore slowed down on his route. Like he kind of took himself out of the play and then got back in really quick when he saw the ball.
But wasn't it an RPO? Like it was an RPO. So he didn't know if he was going to block.
That looked like a designed pass play. I do think that Mahomes probably shouldn't have tried to make the throw because the defender
read Mahomes like a book, whether Moore was there or not. Yeah.
But Moore certainly didn't give Mahomes any sort of wiggle room on that, right? Like I think
he wasn't even close enough to the ball to try to make a play on it. Yeah. So again, I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter. It was another mistake, and we've seen way too many of them from the Chiefs this year compared to their own standard. All of this is compared to their own standard. We'll see. I'm the most concerned about the injuries. There's no question. Like the injuries are the concerning part coming out of yesterday's game, coupled with the injuries that the Chiefs had going into that game. How do they now battle this injury bug, and can they piece it together? Does Shaq Leonard all of a sudden make sense for Kansas City to go try and find, as you've got 2-3 injuries to the linebacker position last night by itself? I don't know, but they finished with Buffalo. That'll be tough on Sunday. Don't kid yourself. And then it's at New England, Raiders, hobbled Cincinnati, at Chargers. They should be fine in those final 4 games, but Buffalo this week gets really interesting because you've got a hobbled Kansas City potentially trying to take down the Bills, who still have Josh Allen and Steph Diggs and
they're desperate.
Some talented players
right now.
Absolutely. That becomes really interesting. So, for the Chiefs, we'll see. Look, they're not they're right there with everyone else.
You're concerned about the injuries, and I get that, and I'm right there with you. I think one of my other major concerns that came up last night, the offensive line, and I know Donovan Smith had a neck injury. He was out for a majority of the game. Wanya Morris came in and took his place. Jawan Taylor continues to be the most penalized player in the NFL, it seems like. So I'm concerned there because of the fact that not only were they allowing that pressure on Mahomes that we haven't seen really before, especially in the red zone, but that offense is predicated on passes behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage. You've got to have good blocking downfield. And I know that not all of that is on the offensive line, but I've got some concerns moving forward when they don't have the weapons for Mahomes to consistently get the ball downfield, and they've got to throw it behind the line of scrimmage. If you don't have solid blocking, that's not going to work. And so I think defenses are starting to learn, okay, like it's not really a major threat for Patrick Mahomes to throw the ball deep downfield to these receivers to go and get it. So we can really stack the box and try to prevent them from doing anything behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I agree. And no, we're not really bringing up the ref show at the end with the one for sure missed PI call,
bad.
which is unfortunate.
It was bad.
And they're not going to call it on a Hail Mary, but yeah, it was bad. But again,
the personal foul call on Mahomes, that was bad too. Like it was just bad officiating all the way around on that final drive.
Yep, that's right. That's right. It was too bad that final drive came down to that. All right, we have lots of stuff to give away and lots of stuff to get to. We're going to get to the CFP next. On our way out, let's give away a pair of tickets to a sneak peek of the new movie Wonka. This is the new movie Wonka. If you've seen the previews, it's at Boulevard Theaters at Town West Square on Thursday, December 14th. We'll give away a pair of tickets to the first caller right now on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. Oh my God, college football. What did you do? We'll talk about it next on Sports Daily. Primetime NFL games from Westwood One available live for free tonight on the Odyssey app. Tune in right here on KFH for Monday Night Football, Cincinnati and Jacksonville. Or you can simply download the Odyssey app and search for KFH at kickoff. Congratulations to Diane for winning that pair of tickets to see the new Wonka movie at Boulevard Town West Theaters. A sneak peek there. We'll get that going for the next couple of weeks up until that. Lots of chances to win there. More chances to win prizes today. Riverside Meal, Riverside Cafe and Derby, HTO still to come on giveaways today, so stay tuned for that. Tommy, the CFP. Oh, my God. So I get on an airplane. When did they decide this, by the way? Was it Saturday, Sunday? I don't even remember.
No, it was Sunday.
Whatever.
It was revealed like Sunday early afternoon.
So I'm on an airplane. We had just like an insanely early flight, and I'm looking around and I'm like, wait, they did what? I've been telling everybody, because I know a lot of Texas fans. I'm like, just root for Alabama to lose. Like that's what needs to happen to make this thing super simple. Alabama wins, and I'm like, oh man, now they got a decision to make with Texas and Alabama. That'll be interesting to see. Although it shouldn't be. Texas beat Alabama, and then they keep out Florida State, who's unbeaten. And I'm like, wait, what did they do? And like, I want to like punch a hole in the wall and just violently shake those people that are like, oh, it needs to be the best teams, not the teams that deserve it the most. I'm like, what the hell are we talking about? Is that how we should pick our Super Bowl? Which two teams are the best? Not which two teams deserve it because they won to get there. Let's just get a room full of people. We'll say, all right, guys, we've seen the whole season. We've all done this. Who do we think ought to be in the Super Bowl this year? That's literally what we do with college football, and people defend that and are okay with it. Florida State went unbeaten. Florida State beat LSU by a bigger margin than Alabama beat LSU. Like, what are we overthinking here? They played the exact same caliber schedule, and Florida State beat the similar opponent by more points. How is Alabama in? Sorry, Alabama, don't lose to Texas at home. If you want to get in, go cry me a river. This is insane. What are we doing?
I can't take credit for this. I heard Mike Greenberg on ESPN say this morning, that college football is now basically figure skating because you've got a bunch of judges who are now determining who's going to get in. Like that's basically what it is now, right? Like in this whole system,
what it's always been.
This system is broken, and we've known it for a long time, and we know it's changing. Like, that's great in the future. Okay, that's awesome that we're going to a 12-team playoff. Long overdue, but that doesn't change anything with the way that I can imagine Florida State fans in that program feeling today after what happened yesterday. The thing about it is that the committee, if you were to leave out any of the other teams that were right there with Florida State for that number 4 spot, or even the number 3 spot with Texas, there were legitimate football justifications that the committee could make to leave out any of those other teams, right? You tell Texas, well, you shouldn't have lost to OU in the Red River rivalry. You tell Alabama, you shouldn't have lost to Texas. You tell Georgia, you shouldn't have lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. You can't say any of that to Florida State. There is nothing that the committee can say to justify that decision to Florida State. They're a Power 5 conference champion, undefeated team playing a pretty strong strength of schedule. What more do they have to do? And simply, this is the committee putting the brand of Alabama football above everything else. It's putting the ratings and the revenue above everything else because this committee is beholden to the networks. Like, that's just what it is. Like, they're beholden to Disney and ABC to provide the most entertaining product on the field, to sell the most advertising commercials, to make the most money. And an Alabama football team over a Florida State team that lost its starting quarterback, that's going to get the job done in their mind. It's absolutely egregious to the sport and to what we love about college football.
It's why I've never been able to totally latch on. I think that I hate the way we determine college football champions more than I hate any sports thing. It doesn't make sense. It's never made sense. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's like nowhere near the best way to do it. I don't understand why people like this. Why are you like defending this? Why have you put up with this? Why have you said, well, the conversation's good for the sport? Is it good for the NFL? Like, look at literally every other sport. That doesn't make any sense. It's only a conversation because it makes no sense. You don't think that a conversation about, let me just pull up the rankings. And look, I think 12 may be overkill. I think 8 would have been fine, but look, 12 it's going to be fine. But you're going to sit here and tell me having the conversation about not having Florida State in despite being undefeated with a ton of quality wins, including a better win over the same opponent than Alabama has, because you don't get to play similar schedules in college football. But you're going to tell me a conversation about what would we have there? A 6-7 against Georgia, Ohio State in the first round of a CFP with 12 teams is a better conversation to have than Florida State not getting in despite being unbeaten? I mean, get out of town with that garbage. That's absolute nonsense. Georgia didn't deserve to get in. Alabama didn't deserve to get in. The SEC champion, which is the best league, sorry, guys, play better non-conference schedules. You didn't deserve to get in. Alabama tried. They played Texas, and they lost. That's why 4 teams isn't enough. It's stupid. Is that because maybe, Tommy, Alabama is the best team. But guess what? Their resume didn't deserve to put them in a 4-team playoff. That's why you have a 12-team playoff, to let a team like Alabama, who had a young quarterback early in the year and take a loss, get a chance to come in. How about this? So Florida State loses its quarterback, which is apparently why they're not in, right? Even though they won every game after they lost him.
That's why.
So if that's the case, then why are you giving Alabama the benefit of the doubt for having a young, inexperienced quarterback at the beginning of the year versus Florida State having a young and inexperienced quarterback at the end of the year? Like, it is absolutely ridiculous. And this has been my fear from the beginning with realignment, is that this is what we're going to end up with, right? This kind of garbage. That despite everything else that's happened, we've got to get the SEC champion in there. No, you don't. Not in a 14 playoff. You don't, because they didn't deserve to be there. And if you just have a super SEC and a super Big Ten, then what does that do for the rest of us? Because guess what? We're not going to watch this crap. You better get these other teams in. Now, today, and you sent me a bunch of this, there's a ton of chatter about ACC teams. Like, what's the point of the ACC? And they're calling, apparently, according to some reports, your mark in the Big 12 right now to prevent this. Because what would have happened? I mean, Texas is in the Big 12 this year, but they're basically not a Big 12 team anymore. Right. Like, if you're the Big 12, if you're the ACC, you look at this and you say, guys, we might get left out. We can't have this. What have we been saying for 2 years? The Big 12 and the ACC need to just merge. Well, first we were saying it about the Big 12 and the Pac-12, right? They need to just merge. That this is why that needs to happen, so that you can have such a definitive. And look, if they're going to have a 12-team playoff and you have a league that big, you have way more power to say, you better guarantee us some spots here. And that's what's happening.
Right.
But my
But
God,
look,
what a disaster in the last year of this crap.
And I don't pretend to be some kind of math genius or anything, but as of right now, aren't there still 5 power conferences and 4 spots in a playoff? Like
Which
that's
has
just
never made sense.
It's never made sense. Like that doesn't make sense at all. And look, I've heard people that have said, well, you're still going to have the same kind of issues when you go to a 12-team playoff because there are going to be the other teams that are going to be left out. Yeah, but we're not talking about legitimate national championship teams.
We're not talking about
13 and 14 and 15 that aren't getting in. We are talking about that right now. We're talking about a Florida State team logically and realistically without Jordan Travis. Were they going to play for a national championship? Probably not.
They haven't lost any
Probably
games.
not.
Like we can't say that. No, don't even entertain that thought into your head. Doesn't matter. Don't even let that thought creep into your head, because that's the garbage they're trying to sell us. Well, Florida State couldn't have really won a national championship anyway. Really? Did you watch Alabama play early in the year? They just beat Georgia, who hadn't lost a game in 3 years. So I like that. You can't say that. We don't do that in any other place. You can't say, would they have actually?
I'm not justifying. I'm not justifying their decision.
But
what I'm
don't
saying,
even let those dumb thoughts come in, because that's what they try to sell us on. Well, they're not actually going to have a chance.
But my point, what I'm saying is that you can miss me, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but other people have said this. You can miss me with the argument that this is the way it's going to be every single year. Yeah, it's this way to an extent, I guess, with March Madness, where you're talking about bubble teams not getting in, but we're not talking about teams that are legitimately national championship contenders. We're not.
They didn't deserve it. No, and I don't even know if they're contenders. Could LSU get on a run and win one? Maybe. Don't care. They lost 3 games, right? So you're not having, and sometimes, and a lot of times, it's been very clear or obvious who the 4 are. But you're teetering with disaster, because this year you've got 7 teams to fit into a 4-team playoff, right? 7 that absolutely deserve a chance in a playoff to play. And this would have been a really good year for 12, quite frankly, because there's a clear line after 12. Now, there's not always going to be a clear line, but if there were 8, right, you would have had a tough decision at 8. Between Oregon, Missouri, Penn State, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma. That would have been a tough decision. And, it's not always, the math doesn't always work that way, clearly. But, if it's whoever it is, like 12 is going to be fine. The bigger the number is, number one, the more fun we have with the playoff. But number 2, you just take all doubt out of the equation, right? You have a chance to make it. Just think about how great this month of football would be if they would play it like A, every other level of college football, and B, every other level of major sports in this country. Like, we should be playing playoff games. We should not be at a bowl selection trying to, decipher and get people excited for a mayonnaise bowl. Make playoff games. The bowls can still be there. But take this month for those teams that deserve to be there and let them play. And you know what else? If you're worried about players not being motivated, all this extra money that's going to get generated, figure out a way to pay the players for getting into the postseason. Here's a bonus. Congratulations. If you're on the roster and playing in these games, you get $10,000, whatever it is, because the money they're going to make with the playoff is absurd, and people aren't like, there's nothing to say. We had a group of people deciding who gets to play instead of letting the teams play for it. It's as dumb as it sounds. It is.
Yeah.
And it's always been that way.
Florida State finished number 3 in the final AP poll of the season. They finished number 4 in the final coaches poll of the season. Like, those 2 standards, and they have been standards for decades, both of them have Florida State in that Final Four. And you know what? It's a subjective thing. You're dealing with people in a room. And by the way, there's no transparency. That's a big issue that I've got with it too. They're in a closed door setting.
Subjective.
There's no transparency, and it's all subjective with these people who are all college athletics administrators, that have biases and they've got opinions and like things like that. I would even feel better about this if the committee just came out and said, look, we have an obligation to our network to provide a game and provide multiple games and 4 teams that are going to drive ratings so we can make that network money. That's why we have chosen these 4 teams for the entertainment value of what they bring to the table. They're never going to say that, but I would at least feel a little bit better if they said that's why the brand of Alabama football got in and not Florida State, who is undefeated and a Power 5 conference champion.
The committee's I don't even want to blame the committee because they're put in a ridiculous spot too. Like they're being asked to do something absolutely ridiculous. They're being told to take the 4 best teams. Okay. So that's not their fault to have to sit there and say, we think these are the 4 best teams. Like that's what they're being told to do. So it's not
but every metric has Florida State over Alabama.
The problem would have been, and Florida State got screwed on that. Don't get me wrong, but the problem, even if Florida State was in, the problem was going to be they were going to be asked to do the same thing with other teams, most notably Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, right? They were still going to have an impossible task. At that point, you're guessing. You're not guessing in the sense of Texas over Alabama. That one is not guesswork. They literally beat them in Alabama. But it is guesswork to just say, well, I think Texas is better than Ohio State, and I think Texas is, better than Georgia. Georgia's a little easier to do it with, right? Because you beat Alabama, Alabama beat Georgia. I get it. But how can you definitively say Texas is better than Ohio State? I mean, you can't.
It's hard to do.
Well, you can't. If Texas and Ohio State played today, who are you going to bet on?
You can compare strength of schedule. You can compare those different things, right? Like there are ways that you can try to come up.
But if you bring strength of schedule in, now you've got a problem with Georgia again, because Georgia probably played a tougher schedule. I'm not saying that definitively. I'd have to look, but like you're always going to have this, and this isn't necessary, and it's not good. Look, it's solved next year finally. And there's a part of me, like a small part, because I feel terrible for Florida State. This is ridiculous and stupid. But there is a small part of me that's like throwing the bird right now to the 4-team system and saying, see what you did. Like, this is what you have now. Bye. Bye, Felicia. Don't ever come back. And don't ever try to explain to me why this has been better for the sport. The fact that we've had, who was really that champion back in 1998? That's a good conversation. No, it's not a good conversation.
Look, and I will say, like, this is terrible and egregious and all of that. It's ridiculous that it's taken this long to get to a 12-team playoff. The 4-team was better than what we had before. So it's like incremental growth, I guess. I don't know. I mean, because back in the day, a computer simulation determined who the national champion was. Before that, newspaper columnists decided who the national championship was. Like the system has always been broken. It's always been bad. It's pathetic that like Pee Wee youth football has a playoff system and college football making billions and billions and billions of dollars has not had a legitimate playoff system until what we're looking at next season.
It would be one thing if there was like this better money, like it was just so obvious that like it's financially better for them to not have a playoff system, right? Yeah. That was the argument for 2 decades was, we can't lose the money of the bowls. Nobody on the planet thinks that there won't be more money made in a playoff system. It's like totally just being stubborn for some reason. You can't have 5 major conferences and 4 teams make the postseason. You have to have your biggest and best conferences represented in a playoff. We'll see what happens now with the ACC and the Big 12. Maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to the Big 12. I don't know. We'll find out over the coming days.
Get them all, Yormark. Get them all. Bring them over.
Get every single one of them. And then go at Oregon State and Washington State just for fun. Just because they deserve it. What do you think? IHOP hotline. What do you guys think out there? Is there any college football defenders of this system out there? I know you're there because I see you on social media all the time chirping away. 869-1240. I won't be as aggressive with you as I am when you're, whatever, but it makes me so angry. I hate this for Florida State. Stupid. All right, let's give away. Oh, what should we do here, Jad? Let's do some HTO Brewhouse coffee right now. We'll give away 2 Brewhouse free Brewhouse offerings. That's iced, hot coffee, espresso, all the good stuff, all the fancy stuff. You can get it at HTO in East Wichita or HTO in Derby. Those cards will be good for either location. We'll do it at the IHOP hotline right now, 869-1240. Good luck, everybody. We'll come back. We'll wrap up hour number 1. We've got Shreyas Laddha coming up at the top of the second hour. We'll talk about KU with our KU Insider and their bowl selection. All coming for you on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back, everybody. Quick segment here. Congratulations to Adam for winning the HTO Brewhouse coffee drinks. Congratulations to Adam. We'll have a Riverside Cafe giveaway for our friends down in Derby coming up in the second hour. Dylan Gabriel, a little bit of breaking news. The Oklahoma quarterback has entered the portal, much the same as Will Howard. Probably, Tommy, gives Will Howard some competition in a landing spot. Pretty curious transfer portal deal there. Kind of the same thing for me. Didn't even think of him as a transfer guy, right? Because he's a senior. But it's fine. Like here, it's you're just going to have to get used to it. Like that's the part of, you can talk all about the playoff all you want in college football and how that will make it different. That will definitively, without question, make it better. Transfer portal, I think, is room for a little bit more of a good old days. It's unavoidable, but because it's better for the players and that's just the way things are going. But it'll be interesting. Like it will be interesting to see, and it already has been, but we get over it really quickly, right? Like a game into the season, and you're sort of fine with Spencer Rattler being at South Carolina and Adrian Martinez being at Kansas State, and just these little changes, and Bo Nix being in Oregon. Like, okay, like it's fine. Like it doesn't matter really all that much. It's every year is an individual year. And that's it's just sort of like having free agency in pro sports. It's just not that big a deal. It will take getting used to, though.
Going to have a ton of different new look quarterbacks on different teams throughout the course of next season because of all the quarterbacks that are going to the draft. And then, of course, the transfers and all of that. I saw Kyle McCord from Ohio State also is in the transfer portal as of this morning. So another top tier quarterback you would think that will probably give some competition to Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard and some of the others that have entered the portal. But, it's that time where you've got these guys that are on the market. And we heard what Matt Rule said last week about how much these quarterbacks are going for on the market. And so I would imagine the bidding is pretty hot and heavy as of now.
It is. And, it will continue to be that way. It'll be fun to follow. We'll get into Wichita State a little bit, I think, in the next hour. We'll have plenty of time to do that this week. They had a big one against Missouri last night. This has been, just as an aside, this college basketball season has been nuts. Southern beat Mississippi State yesterday. Like there are so many just wild and crazy outcomes that I'm starting to like, and I know Wichita State lost to Missouri yesterday, but their consistency is like, I'm kind of like, it's been impressive that they've at least been consistent so far this year. But we'll get into the shockers. We'll talk a little about what KU did on the basketball weekend, as well as their bowl selection for football with our KU Insider to get things going for us at the beginning of hour number 2. It's Albracht and Castor. It's Sports Daily. Halfway home on a Reaction Monday, unlike many others. But we'll continue to make our way through it as we roll forward on Sports Daily.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
It's that time, Sports Daily, getting all the inside information on the Kansas Jayhawks. Let's go now to the KU football and basketball beat writer from the Kansas City Star, Shreyas Latta.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, reacting to a wild sports weekend, and we turn our attention now up to Lawrence with Shreyas Latta, our KU insider, joining us here on the show. Shreyas, how are you? You know your bowl destination.
I'm good. I'm excited. Should be a fun one. Phoenix, in Christmas time, it'll be a nice warmer weather, I think, which will be a nice change of pace from what the Kansas cold. And, I guess a nice preview of what next year has to offer between Kansas and UNLV, because I think they play next year as well, which I was a little surprised about. But, I know Kansas players are excited because a lot of those guys have not played or been to Phoenix ever.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is the Guaranteed Rate Bowl against UNLV, a team that's been good this year. You know what? I kind of like it for KU because I think it's a game absolutely that they can win. Should win. We'll determine that, I guess, as we make our way through. But I think it is. I mean, this looks like a game KU needs to go win, and a win in a bowl game would be sort of the next step, I guess, in this, if we're still calling it a rebuild.
Yeah. No, I think it's just, they should beat UNLV. I think they're like 13-point favorites or something coming into this game on betting line. So, winning a bowl game is the next step as a program, right? Like they took a step last year making a bowl game either, obviously they've lost in heartbreaking fashion. But I think the entirety of it is this year, I think there was some unsold, they probably felt like they could have been a little better than their record was, and maybe they could have been, things had gone right in year 6 bowl. So, obviously that didn't happen, circumstances with injuries aside, they need to go out there and probably put the beat down on UNLV to kind of make up for that. I think, a lot of these guys remember what happened last year and are using that as motivation.
I watched some of the comments from Coach Leipold and some of the players after the announcement was made that they were going to Phoenix for the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. From your perspective, what's the overall mentality from the staff, from the players about going to Phoenix, playing UNLV, and playing in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl?
I think the expectation is they're excited. They know how big of a deal it is to go to a bowl game 2 straight times, especially if you're Kansas football and if you're a Kansas football fan. That hasn't happened since 2007, 2008, which was the first time ever, So I think the coaching staff and Lance talked about it yesterday where they are, it was in the top list of their bowls. And I think they were excited because Phoenix is a fun location. I know some players wanted the Pop-Tart Bowl in Orlando, and K-State got that, which is unfortunate. But I think this was probably the second best bowl KU could have gotten, realistically. Maybe the Pac-Sac Bowl, but it didn't seem like that was a real possibility. They weren't going to go to Memphis again with Liberty Bowl. So I think this opportunity to play a team like UNLV, which has a good record, but Kansas should beat, will be good. And it'll be a good feeling for, I think, this program to ideally end the season on a win.
Let's talk. UNLV lost big to Boise State. I'm trying to I haven't watched any UNLV this year. I was actually just out in Vegas. I could see Allegiant all lit up for that game. But they lost big to Michigan. You haven't played a lot of good teams. Really, they haven't played any good teams, and they've got a bunch of losses. I'm with the line here. For KU, I guess let's look at it this way. We know K-State's got a lot of headline things happening between now and the bowl game. KU's been much more quiet. What do we expect as far as players playing? I assume Jason Bean will go out with a swan song here, but elsewhere on the roster, ahead of the bowl game, just I guess ahead of everything with the transfer portal officially opening up, what has been the chatter with KU? It's been much noisier over in Manhattan than it has been in Lawrence so far.
Well, I mean, I don't expect anybody to sit out or not play or lessen stats. I mean, Lance said it yesterday. They've not even had discussions about that at all. And I think, honestly, this will be a relatively quieter season for departures just because of the season KU's had. And with some of the departures of just guys getting old and not having eligibility enough, whether they're going to the draft or, done with their playing careers, it opens up some other opportunities for some of the guys who've been waiting in the wings. I think Kansas State is in an interesting transition period with their QB situation, while Kansas ideally gets Jalen Daniels healthy next year, and maybe they pick up a transfer portal quarterback, or they put Cole Ballard at second string, and they have Zeke Marshall coming in, who's looked great, high school quarterback at third string or something like that. Kansas' main guys to really check out is, if Devin Yield decides to declare for the draft, if the Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant decide to play for the draft, and a couple of the O-line pieces. Those couple of guys are the ones to kind of pay attention to. But I don't anticipate any of those guys sitting out, and I don't think any of these guys would be a day one pick anyway. Just based on projections of what everyone's seeing. I think Kobe has the highest chance of getting drafted high out of any of the players, or one of the offensive linemen like Cooney.
Let's talk a little bit about the Big 12 in general, Shreyas. Of course, Texas makes the CFP. We talked about the CFP last hour and the decision to leave Florida State out, but Texas gets in, KU in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, K-State in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Just from your perspective, from following the Big 12 all season long, where do you land on where some of these teams ended up in their bowl games? Do you feel like it's a good showing for the Big 12 overall this season, or was there anything that you wanted to see differently?
I mean, they have 9 teams in a bowl game, right? Qualified for a bowl game. I think that is a big thing for the conference. You have Texas. I know most Big 12 does not love Texas, especially with them leaving, but you have Texas representing in college football playoffs. I think ideally you'd hope Oklahoma or Oklahoma State would be in a year 6 bowl, but they were not. Or Oklahoma was not. So it's I think there are things that could have happened and gone a little better for the Big 12 in that instance. But I think for the most part, the bowl pairings and the bowl, kind of overall stuff makes sense. The only thing I was really surprised with, at least with KU, was I don't know why they didn't take a Big Ten opponent and why pick UNLV. But the more I thought about it is, this is the day after Christmas, and, UNLV is a local-ish fan base that can, kind of get down to Phoenix relatively quickly. So if Kansas fans, God forbid, cannot come because it is the day after Christmas or flights are really expensive, at least they'll have a decent amount of support from UNLV fans. I think the date of the conference makes it a tough traveling choice for a lot of fan bases. And I think that's why Kansas UNLV makes a little more sense.
Shreyas Latta joining us, our KU insider here, beat writer for the KC Star for both football and men's basketball. Let's turn there next, Shreyas. A Jekyll and Hyde season of sorts for the Jayhawks, who started the year as the top team, have had some head scratchers, not just losses, but I think we could call some of the performances head scratchers, right? Eastern Illinois, a tight game, but then a win over UConn. So we've had a little of everything this year for KU, but UConn's certainly one that makes everybody feel a little bit better. What is it that makes this team Jekyll and Hyde right now, and what do they need to do to not be that way?
Well, I think what it makes is the reason that occurs is because Kansas's outside shooting and rebounding are going to be inconsistent all year. I think it's one of those things where, they shot the ball really well from 3 against UConn. They went 9 of 14, but how often do you really expect this Kansas team with not a ton of really potent 3-point shooters to hit 9 of 14 from 3? I don't think it's going to happen that often. And, I think I saw the shot quality indicator. They made 7 of 8 contested threes. There was a lot that went right for Kansas against UConn, and the defense was stifling and really, really good. I was very impressed. And obviously UConn made some tough threes with hands in the face, whatever. But, the defense from Kansas is going to be, I think, the biggest strength so far this season. And I think the rebounding thing, they weren't out-rebounded too badly against UConn. And I think Hunter Dickinson did a good job against Klingon. But just you look back at these two things, right? I think we're going to be talking about all year. If Kansas is getting out-rebounded badly, what is the rebounding margin? Is it something that's within 2 or 3, then you can win games. If it's something like, they're 5, 6, 7 rebounds, different than the next team, then you're probably going to end up losing that game because they don't have the three-point shooting consistency or the, I think the shooters in general, especially with the way the roster is currently constructed and the playing time, the way the guys have played, to have these games where they can be out-rebounded and outshot from 3. You're going to lose those games probably 95% of the time, So I think that is the reason why there's been a little inconsistency because they don't have a three-point shooting and they don't shoot the ball a lot from 3. 14 attempts is really not a lot in college basketball these days, and, the fact that they made 9 was a miraculous thing in itself.
You mentioned the defensive effort. I'm with you. I thought defensively, the Jayhawks were pretty turned up for the majority of the game. The atmosphere played into that, I think, a little bit too. I mean, it was pretty incredible, the fan base and everything showing up for that game on Friday. But really, I want to get your thoughts on when UConn made that run in the second half. They took the lead. Kansas kind of absorbed the body blows a little bit. And then I think it was Johnny Furphy off the bench made a big time 3 to kind of get things back on track for the Jayhawks. How important was that stretch, do you think? And how important is it going to be for somebody like Johnny Furphy to be that spark guy off the bench?
Incredibly important. Right now, we're looking at a team that has 3 players that I can count on to trust with the ball and score the bucket. And those 3 players are Kevin McCullough, Dickinson, and KJ Adams. Marco Jackson, DeJuan Harris had not given anything for Kansas this year besides the Kentucky game on the offensive end. Again, against UConn, they were like 3 of 9 for a combined 9 points. You can't have that from your starting backcourt. So you need something for your bench because right now Nick Timberlake is playing like 5 minutes a game against a team like UConn, which is not great because he can't play defense quite as well. And if he's not making shots, Self obviously doesn't seem to trust him out there quite right now. And, you need a guy like Johnny Furphy who can hit some threes just to alleviate the pressure off Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson in particular. Those 2 guys, I think, have so much of the offensive load. I think I was thinking about it this weekend. I was like, if a guy like Grady Dick could come back, this team would be so good, because it is a better team than last year in some instances. And, Hunter Dickinson has made this team so interesting overall. They just need some leaps from some of the younger guys. They need El Marco to feel a little more comfortable at the offensive end. They need Furphy to kind of keep showing what he's showing and doing it on an increased minutes intake and taking more threes and making more threes. And they need a guy like Timberlake to figure out his shooting struggles. So there's, a couple of things that have to go right. But I think that stretch was so important and an indicator of what this Kansas team needs. Like, they can get by against most teams with a Kevin McCullough, Hunter Dickinson effort, right? But against the top tier teams, against the top 15, top 10, they need a guy like Johnny Furphy or Jamari McDowell or Marco Jackson or Nick Timberlake to step up if DeJuan and El Marco are struggling.
I'm going to say something that pains me to say because I'm such a big fan of his as a player. DeJuan Harris is not playing well. Is that fair? Like, I don't think he looks good right now. He's turning the ball over oddly. He doesn't look confident. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't look like DeJuan Harris.
No, I agree. He has not been as good as last year up to this point. And I haven't really been superly impressed with him, even with how good of a player he can be. I have high expectations for him. I haven't been very impressed with him outside of the Kentucky game. It's just, I don't know what's going on. I liked the fact that he was aggressive in hunting a shot. He made that 3 early against UConn, I think, to help set the tone initially. And I think that was big. He took 6 shots, which is, I think, is good. You need him to take shots, right? And he didn't shoot the ball well, but whatever. But he has got to kind of, this Kansas team more than most. I know we talked about it last year. Everyone talked about, look, DeJuan has to shoot when he's open, right? But I cannot understate or overstate this enough. This Kansas team desperately needs DeJuan to shoot because right now Marco Jackson is going through the rookie, the freshman kind of struggles, and maybe he'll figure out, maybe he won't. I don't know. But, they need the spacing desperately to help Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson. Because right now the offense sometimes looks like, these guys just having to kind of do some magic to get a shot off. And I know they lead in assists, but that's because they have to slow down the game so much to get a quality shot. And I think they don't play with pace as much, and because they don't shoot a lot of threes, it's so much tougher overall for Kansas. But I think this Kansas team needs an aggressive, a more offensively minded DeJuan Harris. They need him to be a little more alert, I think, because he's had some weird, uncharacteristic turnovers. They need him to not miss free throws in the clutch like he did against UConn. And I expect him to be better. He's a really good player. But it's been a weird watch of him this year because I don't think he's really taken a step up. He looks like he's been worse than last year.
Well, Shree is not trying to glaze over the UMKC game on Tuesday, but of course, everybody looking ahead to Saturday as the Jayhawks play the Missouri Tigers. Missouri's an interesting team. They've had a couple of pretty good wins, had a good win against Pitt in the SEC-ACC showdown, beat Wichita State yesterday in Columbia, but they had a bad loss earlier this season to Jackson State. What do we know about the Tigers, and what do you think the Jayhawks will have to exploit to get this big win?
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun game because rivalry games always have these players, playing amped up, and Missouri's going to give everything they can to kind of force Kansas to be uncomfortable. And I think that's going to be really interesting because, they've had an up and down season so far. It's hard to make a lot of how Missouri's played because the competition they played hasn't been necessarily the best. Kansas has played all these top 20 teams, and Missouri, I don't think has played more than one or two, if I remember correctly. And I think for Kansas, the main thing will be, making sure Hunter Dickinson wins his matchup handily. Kevin McCullough needs to have another good game. And then, one or two guys either off the bench or Walker Jackson or DeJuan Harris needs to contribute offensively. I think Kansas will have the upper hand in defense. Kansas is really, really good, I think, when they're connected and locked in. And Kansas had a great defensive game against UConn that made me excited in the sense that when they're locked in, I think there's no better defensive team in the country. They were so interconnected. They were communicating. They were engulfing UConn players whenever they converged or drove to the basket, and they converged on them. And I expect something similar to happen against Missouri, who doesn't necessarily have the talent level that UConn has. So I think Kansas should win that game relatively handily. I don't know if it'll be as big of a blowout as last year, but it's going to be interesting to kind of see how both teams play because, obviously playing in Allen Fieldhouse against Missouri, the building is going to be juiced and amped up. It might be even more juiced and amped up than it was against UConn,
Oh, I think it will be. I think people are excited about it. I still think they get up for that game. All right, Shreas, what do you guys have coming up at the KC Star with all the bowl stuff and transfer portal stuff and, of course, KU basketball in full swing?
Yeah, we'll have my scouting breakdown of UMKC later today, and we'll have some stuff from Leipold's press conference from Self's press conference, and I'll have another bowl game story I think that'll come out today, and just the typical stuff. I think it'll be a fun week for Kansas football and Kansas basketball coverage, mostly Kansas basketball, but I think the hype around Kansas, Missouri is always very high. And I'm looking forward to seeing and covering that game in Allen Fieldhouse.
All right. You can find all the work at the KC Star. You can follow Shreas on social media at SHRE98. We will have plenty more to come with what's happening in the football offseason, and we'll get a recap of the Mizzou game next week with you, Shreas. Be good.
Appreciate it, you guys. Thanks, guys.
There goes Shreas Latta. Tommy and I have plenty to accomplish here in the second hour. We do want to talk a little Shocker basketball. We'll probably get back to the Chiefs a little bit here as they lose in Sunday Night Football. If you miss any of the program, no problem. You can always go back to KFH Radio and listen to it. It gets segmented out for you. Jad makes that super easy for you. We've got another giveaway. We'll give away a meal from Riverside Cafe and Derby coming up later in this hour as well. All on a big Monday on Sports Daily. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Jake Albracht, Tommy Castor, Sports Daily. Appreciate Sharice Law stopping by. We'll have another giveaway coming up. Tommy, let's talk a little Shocker basketball. Right in the middle of a busy busy NFL Sunday. We got the game against Mizzou. So I landed and got home and was able to catch most of the second half of the game. I know the margin was 10 in the end of it. It felt closer than a 10-point game. Certainly it was within 3 multiple times on the road, a true road game. I don't think anything we saw in that derails the momentum it feels like the Shockers have achieved this year. I don't think. You look at the board, they won the rebounding battle, which is something we want to see them continue to do. They turned it over way too much. That was something we really haven't seen them do, and it was the X factor in the game, I think. They shot it well in the first half, and then they couldn't get anything to fall from 3 in the second half. So, there were some things you'd like to see, but it was the turnovers that were uncharacteristic. But, all things considered, they shot free throws well. That was a positive sign, I think, for the team. But I don't think anything we saw Sunday derails what we've seen from the Shockers thus far.
Well, they got to take care of the ball better. And I think Paul Mills knows that. I think that anybody watching that game yesterday knows that, right? That, you take away even a portion of those turnovers and Wichita State probably wins the game. That being said, though, they got off to a really bad start. Missouri jumped out to a really early lead, and the Shockers turned the ball over quite a few times in the first few minutes of the game. And it was a game of runs. Wichita State got back into it. Then Missouri pulled away again. Then Wichita State got back into it. It was kind of that back and forth game. Harlan Beverly, it's crazy. He had 12 points and 17 rebounds, but had way too many turnovers. So I don't know if you almost have to take the good with the bad a little bit when it comes to Harlan Beverly, because the bad was really bad. A couple of those turnovers were not great at all, but he put up 12 points and had 17 boards, was super active in the rebounding battle. So, that was, I think, kind of a, back and forth thing when you look at, the good was really there with Beverly, but man, those turnovers you just can't have.
He's really explosive. And so, if they can just get him under control a little bit, I think it's going to go a long way. Yeah, but man, that explosion did help them. I also thought through the stretches where they were struggling, he kind of put the load on his back, which he's clearly very comfortable doing that, and that's a good thing.
And how do you do that when you're Paul Mills? How do you try to contain him a little bit to where you're not taking everything away from him, but you're trying to get him to play within himself a little bit more?
I mean, I think you just run some stuff. I think you just, I think you get in a film room and say, look, these are great things, but we've got to show you what those turnovers do to us, right? Those turnovers can't happen. You want the aggression, you want the explosion, you want all those things, but at the same time, it's risk reward. I mean, it's just and he's, I don't want to say this is fact because I don't know. I'd have to ask Paul Mills this question. He's being asked, I think, to do things that were never the original intent because they've become so thin, right, at point guard. And so he is probably handling it a little more than maybe they anticipated because some of the guys they thought they were going to have to help there aren't available. And so I think there's some adjusting there too. But I think when you look at it, because for me, it's more about what do these next games tell us about what we think the Shockers can be in the postseason, or in the conference season. And I think that it still seems good. It still seems optimistic. Look, they're 7-2, right? I don't know how many people would honestly have said with the schedule that they played. And it's not been a monster schedule, don't get me wrong, but 7-2 is totally respectable when you've had games against Missouri and Richmond and St. Louis and Liberty and Western Kentucky. And, I think all those are fine. I love the South Dakota State game this weekend. I think that they'll be favored. They'll certainly be favored over Southern Illinois. They won't be favored over K-State or Kansas. And we're going to get what we thought we'd get. And then, boom, you jump right in to a conference season where it does look like Wichita State, I think, Tommy, should be able to play their way up toward that top 3, like we have said would be a nice, sort of benchmark win. I think I said top 5 at the beginning of the season. I certainly think now they need to be inside the top 5. Can they be higher than that? I think they can.
I am really, really, really fascinated by the game with Kansas State coming up in a couple of weeks, because it took overtime again.
Overtime.
It took overtime again for the Wildcats to beat North Alabama over the weekend.
Yeah.
Overtime against Oral Roberts. I mean, I think that the Wildcats will probably be favored, but man, I think that the margin is a little bit closer than maybe what we initially thought. I think it's going to be a really, really hard fought game between these two programs. The two coaches know each other. They're great friends. They've been friends for a long time. I think that margin is a little bit closer than what we thought.
You've been on that, and I'm coming around to it based on 2 things. One, Wichita State is looking good, and K-State is not looking as good. And so, I'm coming closer to your line of thinking on that. We'll see. I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, but I could be. I certainly could be. And like that's both programs have something to do with that. But yeah, Shockers fall in Missouri. I thought there were a couple of times there late in the second half where I was like, they're gonna get it done here. Like they've stuck around and hung around, and it just didn't happen.
Well, there were what?
I hate that it ended as a 10-point margin, because it was much, much closer game than that.
Yeah, weren't there like 2 different occasions where had a shot gone in, it would have tied the game?
Yes, I believe so.
3 minutes left, and then at that point, Missouri kind of pulled away.
At least one. Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll go back to the Chiefs. I know a lot of people are just joining us, and the Chiefs did lose last night. A lot of takeaways from that game. Big picture stuff. What are we thinking about? I would say the general feel of what I gather from Chiefs Kingdom is pessimism and concern and about a lot of different things. So we'll get into that a little bit again here in our last full segment on the show. On the way out, Jad, let's give our final prize away, and it will be a great meal from Riverside Cafe in Derby, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily. You can call right now, 316-869-1240 on the IHOP hotline for a chance to win a $25 gift certificate to Riverside Cafe, the Derby location at 824 North Baltimore. Good luck, everybody. Jad will get us a winner during the break. We'll come back. More Chiefs talk next on Sports Daily. Welcome back, everybody, to Sports Daily. Albracht and Castor here on this Monday. Got a lot to talk about. Some college hoops mixed into a lot of football talk. Chiefs, college football. Tommy, you sent me this. I guess Stephen A. Smith brought up a good point. I hadn't thought about this. What if Coach Prime was coaching Florida State? They'd be in. Of course they'd be in. Of course they would.
Yeah,
so stupid.
There's no doubt about that. I mean,
So stupid.
it's the ratings, it's the sizzle, it's the presentation, it's all of that. That's what matters in this. The money.
Whatever. That's what's so stupid about it. If it's about the money, then make it a bigger playoff and make more money. Like, what are we doing here? Either make it about the money or make it or not. All right, let's talk Chiefs. So we started the show with the Chiefs, who lose last night to the Packers. We've established that it was the Chiefs' fault, not the refs or not anything else. I think the injuries are by far the most concerning thing about the loss. I think that, soon we'll see what happens with these injuries. I still don't know how comfortable I am picking against the Chiefs with that defense, which played its worst game of the year yesterday. Again, a lot of injuries. But to pick against that defense with Mahomes and Kelsey, I don't think I'm ready to do that. I think what is becoming a little trickier, though, is now it's like against them at Arrowhead, right? Like, what if they have to go on the road? And so now for me, at least, it's starting to get into that sort of territory. I guess I'm putting them with a group of about five. I'll call it 5 teams. I'm still not sure that I'm ready to go there with the Ravens, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now. So if I am including the Ravens, then for me it would be Chiefs, Ravens, Eagles, Niners, Cowboys. Reluctantly on the Cowboys, but I can't ignore what we're seeing in the way Dak's playing. So those are sort of the teams for me. I think the Chiefs are far more even with those teams than I thought they would be, let's say, a month ago. I still would take the Chiefs in the AFC. I do think it's becoming more critical, though, that they play those games at Arrowhead, and a loss hurts your chances there. I mean, the Ravens do have a brutal schedule. We've talked about it. So probably they're okay if they win all the rest of their games. Maybe not, though. And I do think it's going to matter more than maybe I thought it would earlier this year.
Really, the only thing that's kind of a silver lining, I think, for Kansas City in the AFC is the parity in that conference. Like it's still
Totally.
kind of wide open. Like the number 1 seed is still kind of open for the taking between them, the Ravens, the Dolphins, the Jags, maybe the Bills. There might be 1 or 2 other teams that can sneak in there, although I don't have a lot of faith in that. There's a lot of parity in the conference. So that's good. But I do think that we need to start thinking about, and you brought it up, what does this team look like in the playoffs if they're on the road? And we're so used to the playoffs running through Arrowhead. That may not be the case this season, with the way that the Ravens have been playing. I know they've got a tough schedule, but we could very well be talking about Baltimore with the number 1 seed. The Dolphins, we could be talking about them with the number 1 seed potentially. So I think that there is a scenario that plays out where Kansas City absolutely will go on the road in the playoffs. And then at that point, do we feel good about that? Do we feel good about their chances playing on the road? Do we feel good about the offense being able to put together complete drives in the red zone to score in hostile territories? You know, they were in the first half last night shut down in the red zone. They had 2 field goals when Green Bay had 2 touchdowns. That was the difference in the first half. They couldn't get into the end zone in the red zone on the road last night. So will that be the case, or could that be the case as the season progresses if they go on the road down the stretch in the playoffs? All of that, I think that's on the table.
I do too. And look, I think that was like the complete difference in the game. If the Chiefs, I mean, probably if they even convert one of those early scores into a touchdown and not a field goal, I just think the game may have played itself out a little differently. I think the Packers had everything going for them. All the big plays fell in their lap. Credit to them, not trying to take anything away from them. But there was some of that that was pretty self-inflicted on the Chiefs on some just go get 'em balls that their secondary for the first time. I don't remember their secondary playing like that at any other point in this season, but whatever. Miami, good for them. They beat the crap out of Washington. Miami still has not beat a good team this year. They have not. Now they're going to get some chances. They'll get a couple of cupcakes here over the next 2 again, and everyone's going to be all over the Dolphins. And then they'll have to play Dallas at Baltimore and Buffalo at home. If they get home field, it will be interesting. I don't think they will, though, because I don't think they're going to have. I just don't think their record's going to hold up when you look at those final 3 games on their schedule that they have to play. I don't think it will. If it does, they become a contender. If they have to go on the road in the playoffs, I'm not taking Miami. And look, Tyreek Hill may be the MVP this year, but you got it. You still have to go show that you can beat somebody good. They have absolutely not done that this year. They have not beat a good team yet this year, but they sit there now with Baltimore, with Jacksonville. And remember, Kansas City has a tiebreaker over both Miami and Jacksonville, as Kansas City is 1 back of them in the loss column. Kansas City is probably still fine to be able to host right throughout the postseason, because they do, of all of these teams we're talking about, they do have the softest schedule remaining. Buffalo this weekend's interesting, and then they get New England, Vegas, Cincinnati, and the Chargers. Okay, they should be in the best position schedule-wise to get it done. There are other teams that could go unbeaten the rest of the way and take that. But Tommy, of those 3 teams ahead of them, Baltimore, Miami, Jacksonville, I just don't think there's much of a chance any of those teams win all of the rest of their games.
No, but I do think the best team out of those 3 is probably Baltimore. I'm higher up on Baltimore than I know you are. They've got the offensive weapons that Kansas City wishes they had this season. That's the biggest difference. And in the last few weeks, Baltimore's defense has really come to play. So those 2 things combined, I think that's what makes Baltimore probably the biggest threat to the number 1 seed for Kansas City as the season goes on. I think one of the things I'm really concerned about, you remember all those times over the years when the Chiefs had to have a drive and they put it together and it was Mahomes magic and they made it happen. And, you know, even a game to go to the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs put together a 13-second drive to tie the game and get into field goal range. Like, they did that. They're not doing that this season. And there's a lot of reasons why. That's why I mentioned at the top of the show, like, the margin of error is very, very small. I think for the first time in the Mahomes era this season, I'm watching games like last night. You know, the Chiefs had to get a drive down the field to potentially force overtime. I didn't have any faith that they would do it. No, that's like the first time in the Mahomes era, that I didn't have faith. Like, before, it was always like, sit back, let's watch this, grab your popcorn, it's going to be incredible. This season and last night specifically, I had none of that faith.
Well, I don't either, but that's, a part of why I've liked the Chiefs is because of their chance to not need to do that as much, even though that's always a part of the NFL, right? Experience is having to do that. But I think it's just not in their DNA this year. That doesn't mean that they can't go win a Super Bowl, though. Like, that doesn't have to happen if your defense plays that well. The defense did not play well last. I don't know what to make of that other than the injuries, right? Like, I've got to see them play that out. But, Kelsey's a year older. By the way, as an aside, I've heard, and I think probably Taylor Swift has something to do with this unfairly, and I don't think that it's relevant, but that Travis Kelce just doesn't look like he's as invested. I don't buy that at all. The reality is Travis Kelce is reaching an age at the position he plays where guys naturally slow down some historically. Go look at Tony Gonzalez, who played a long time at a high level. It was his age 33 season, Tommy, where it really began to throttle down. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't a good player. He was still a very good player, but not the level of player that we had seen. Travis Kelce's very likely going over 1,000 yards again this season, which will be one of the best age 34 seasons we've ever seen. So just remember that, right? When you remember how strong Tony Gonzalez, because Tony Gonzalez basically went to Atlanta at the same time that Travis Kelce is entering this age of his career. And we think of Tony Gonzalez in Atlanta as a really effective and really great player and still one of the best tight ends in the league. Is Travis Kelce going to continue to rattle off 1,300-yard, 12-touchdown seasons? No, probably not, although he's not going to be – he won't get that many touchdowns this year. But he's not going to be that far off of that this year, probably. He'll probably still – how many games? Where they have 6 games left? Even if he went 50 yards a game, Tommy, he's going to get over 1,000 yards. If he had around 5 catches a game in those, so 5 for 50, he's going to have 100 catches and 1,000 yards and probably about 7 or 8. That's far better than any other tight ends have been at his age. So I think that's very dramatic to say, like, oh, he just doesn't care anymore. No, guys, he's just kind of getting older at that position. That's all it is. Like, and I think that's what you're seeing, right? Like, no, he can't be in there on every play. Yes, he's been nicked up a little bit more this year than others. No, he's not the same. Like, you cannot absolutely, no matter what you do, stop him. Like, he's 34. That's all it is. He's 34. And you've just had it correlate with a severe drop from the wide receiver room. And so, yeah, it does look, and the optics of it are a little worse. Patrick Mahomes doesn't have his safety blanket the same way he has. He still has it, but not the same way he has in years past. That's just an age thing. That's not an interest level thing.
There were a couple of plays last night that were critical that Mahomes found Kelce, so I disregard that argument entirely. I think on top of it too, don't you think, generally speaking, defenses are putting that much more attention on Travis Kelce because they don't have to put it on the wide receivers as much? I think that's
Absolutely.
a pretty big part of it also.
When you triple team him, which is happening.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, they're triple teaming him at times.
Right.
Like that's so I'm fine with Kelce.
That's my point.
And, yeah, no, I know. And so that's also something, though, I think we have to consider when we think about the Chiefs in the postseason. Are they going to, because and this is on me, I've been saying with that defense and Mahomes and Kelce, I'm going to be fine. But at some point, and Rice was, I think he's still developing into being that guy. I do. I mean, outside of Rice, like, did another receiver, like, I'm saying this out loud, and I honestly do not remember last night, and I know they did, but off the top of my head, I do not remember another wide receiver outside of Rashee Rice catching a pass last night.
There was one that I can remember, and I watched the entire game. The one I remember
I did too.
When Marquez Valdez-Scantling was on his back and the ball landed on his stomach. Like, that's the only one that I thought about. But yeah, I mean, I think that regardless what happens this season, if they make the number 1 seed, if they get bounced in the playoffs, if they win a championship, I think regardless of what happens, you've got to start having a really, really hard look at what this team is going to be composed of in the future. And not just at wide receiver, but in some other areas too, but especially wide receiver. I think you have to cut ties with MVS. I think you have to cut ties with Sky Moore. I don't think Sky Moore is going to be the guy. I think you've got to move on from him.
No,
I think you've got to try to sign a veteran. I think you've got to try to draft a wide receiver in the first round and hope that they develop like Rashee Rice has. I think you've got to rebuild that entire room, regardless what happens this season.
Sky Moore is the next McCole Hardman. You don't need to like cut him, but you're just going to let him, slide down the depth chart. For
Trade
what
him.
though? He'll be like McCole Hardman. He'll work his way down the depth chart. Maybe they get a couple of gadget plays and that'll be it. But
Richie James, I thought looked okay. I mean, he had a couple of catches. He was better than the guys that like MVS is making $11 million this year.
He just had
a lot better than him.
He had the one catch. MVS is the problem because MVS is commanding the salary. None of these other guys are commanding a big salary. It's MVS is the elephant in the room because he's your high paid guy. And I never have understood that signing. But whatever. I mean, they needed somebody. But yeah, I think that they will certainly approach that position with a little more urgency than they have. But I don't want to say they haven't approached it with urgency because they've used high draft capital on that position the last 2 years. And a part of it is being able to evaluate receivers. Like some organizations do it really well, some don't. The Steelers do it better than anybody. The Patriots can't do it to save their lives. They've had like one in the last 30 years that they've drafted that ended up being any good, and it was like Deion Branch. That's a long time. What did they do? Well, they just went and found some free agents, and the Chiefs are going to have to do that. They had some success with that with Juju last year. He wasn't even that good, but he was at least, somewhat reliable. MVS has been a swing and a miss in free agency. I mean, they've had plenty of free swing and misses in free agency too. So they just have to get a little bit better at evaluating the position, I think. They've taken it for granted. Certainly, that is very clear and obvious, is that, Tyreek Hill's gone. We win a Super Bowl. We don't even need, a good wide receiver. But that's naive too, because they turn around and drafted Rashee Rice early. And he does look good. I do like Rashee Rice quite a bit. Bad game last night. Unlucky game last night. A lot of injuries last night and some critical mistakes in the red zone. That's it. We'll see. The injuries are what have me concerned on the Monday, though, Tommy, is how many of these guys are seriously hurt.
Yeah, that margin of error we talked about before, it's basically
Very
non-existent.
Small. Yep, it's very small. Got to lean on Mahomes in those moments. And this has been his worst year as a pro, certainly, but it's relative again. Like his worst year is a lot of guys' best year. We'll come back. We'll wrap up this Sports Daily next. Congratulations, by the way, to Mark for winning the meal from Riverside Cafe there in Derby. Coming up on the network today, Jim Rome from 11 to 2, Bob and Jeff locally 2 to 4. You've got the Chiefs Kingdom show at 6 o'clock. Should be an interesting one. Mitch Holthus, I don't know if he'll be there. His streak was snapped as he had COVID and was not able to broadcast the game. So we'll see on that. 7 o'clock, Monday Night Football, Bengals, Jags. For Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. We'll be here to break it all down tomorrow on Sports Daily.